Hello. Let's talk today about that article recently published and it's been going around and being discussed on social media. The article I'm referring to is called The Confessions of an Ex-Philosopher. It's a well-written article, it's honest, and its honesty is admirable. There's an old saying, I don't know its origin, where it comes from, and I don't even know its exact phrasing, how it is supposed to be said exactly, but it has to do with truth. If you want the truth, ask the children, or only children tell the truth, or something like that. Some relationship between childhood and truth-telling, childhood and honesty. But I think this saying misses the mark. And I think the relationship between honesty and childhood is incidental and is itself dependent on the fact that children, for the most part, tend not to have investments on deceit. So they don't gain from lying, usually. They don't have and if they do, they might also lie, just like adults. So I think the more accurate version of the saying should be something like, if you want the truth, you're more likely to get it from someone who has no investment in the matter. Something like that. And the reason why this article has such a strong air of honesty is because it's coming from someone who no longer has investment in the discipline, in academia, and in the whole academic business, the academic way of life. And the academic way of life, let's face it, is heavily charged and saturated with very unpleasant forms of self-promotion and advertisement, advice giving, and of course one of the costs of being on Twitter or having links to academics, other academics on Facebook. One of the costs is that one gets a lot of these formula, like 10 steps for successful networking at a conference. Step 1, smile. Step 2, get in touch with the people you want to network with before the conference, things like that. So by giving these advices, people present themselves as already in a position of success. I already have figured it out. I have cracked the code, so here you go. Reap the benefit of my own successes. So it is against that background of massive self-promotion, that culture of academia, that people are at the deep level, they are forced to viciously compete against each other, and at the same time keeping that facade of pleasantness and cheerfulness. And so there's a lot of irony, there's a lot of tongue-in-cheek jokes. Against that background, a piece like that is refreshing. But we should note that some of the honesty, some of the judgments, especially some of the harsh and angry and maybe bitter judgments that the author has towards himself, should be viewed as the pendulum swinging in the opposite direction and going too far. So we have to give the pendulum some more time to settle down and have to find its own place of equilibrium. And until then, it's going to swing in either of these two extreme positions of I'm a genius and I am worthless, stupid, foolish. I have zero talent for philosophy or any other academic subject. What I was reminded of when I read the article was a movie review I did recently on my YouTube channel. And it was a movie review of the movie Amadeus. Emphasis goes in many different locations. So the movie Amadeus is about the story of Antonio Salieri, the narrator of that story, who is really envious of Mozart. He himself is very informed, and he has we can say he's talented, he's educated in music, he's trained, well trained. He's very technically well trained, and he has this unique point of view in the story, and he is in on the secret that Mozart is a real genius, and he is a superior composer to everybody in that generation. Nobody else knows that secret. Almost nobody else knows that secret except Salieri and a few other people and us. Salieri, because of his envy and because of his self-consciousness, gets into a competition with Mozart that, because he cannot win on the grounds of music, ends up being directed towards more destructive directions. And in that review, I said that the real tragedy portrayed in that movie is that Salieri never gets to let go of his self-consciousness until the very end. Even when he is old, even when Mozart is dead, he's old, he's in an institution, he's alone, he's supposed to have learned his lesson. Even then, when the person is pushing his wheelchair forward, he goes around and he says, seemingly the conclusion of the movie, that, we are all mediocre and I am your patron saint. I am the patron saint of mediocrity. So that seems to be at the end the conclusion that, we are not as good as this genius Mozart. But the real tragedy is that until the very end, poor Salieri is still trying to figure out who he is. Who am I? Because, of course, he is self-obsessed and it always has to be about him. Me. Who am I? If Mozart is so great, who am I? And after swinging so many times back and forth, he settles finally, okay, I am this patron saint of all these mediocre people. The way to get out of that tragedy, in my view, is to just let go of this self-judgment, let go of this obsessive self-consciousness, and be engaged with something, be engaged with music, be engaged, for example, with helping Mozart. Maybe self-consciousness is a product of failing at something, or repeatedly realizing that I'm not good at this task that I've assigned to myself. Let's say I'm playing tennis against a friend. When I was at Leiden University as a postdoc, I went and played tennis with a friend, and she was really good. She was a real tennis player. And I became really conscious of the fact that I'm not as good as her. So at that point, a person who is playing tennis and realizes that I'm going to fail repeatedly, it's natural, it seems reasonable to assume that I'm going to be conscious of myself. So I have two choices. Either continue to play at a level that continues in failure and self-consciousness, or play with someone else. Play with someone who is closer to my level so that I can enjoy the game and I can forget my damn self and just pay attention to the activity, pay attention to the tennis. Because it is not about me, it is about the game, it is about the play. We play, one of the gifts of playing is that it helps us forget ourselves. This stems also, in my view, stems from our current dominant culture, the culture of selfies, the culture of confessions, the culture of who am I, what kind of personality type am I? And so people like, I don't know, I don't want to mention his name, but people can get rich by selling us personality questionnaires. What kind of personality do I have? What kind of temperaments, and what is my political position? Give me a test. I want to figure out objectively what my political positions are, because there's no way in hell I can figure out my political positions by thinking about actual political issues. I have to take a test to figure out who am I, and then I'll frame that result of that test and I put it on the wall as part of my self-presentation. And I'll share it with other people. We also live strangely, really strange to me. Another observation I had recently is that people who are on social media, who are part of this polyamorous subculture, so people who love and enter into relationships with multiple people, somehow it is not enough. Isn't it interesting that it is not enough for us to just be with multiple people? It is not enough for us to just be polyamorous. We have to also have a theory about why we are polyamorous and what polyamory is and its relationship to myself. I'm a kind of self who is polyamorous. It's not that the conditions of my life that I happen to have met 2 or 3 or 5 or 7 people who have triggered this love response in me, this response of affection, and I can't help but love all 7 of them. Somehow it has to do with myself. It doesn't have to do with the conditions in which I find myself, but it's about me. Again, me. And the same things apply to academia. We have the choice. Whenever we face a task, we find ourselves dealing with tasks that are too heavy for us, too difficult for us, we are not good enough for them. We can either continue our self-consciousness or our obsessions and pretend that we are good at something, or we can step down, not completely jump off the ship, but step down a few levels and find something to do that is at our level that allows us to forget ourselves. If it is too difficult for me to, I don't know, just a random question, that random problem off the top of my head. If it is too difficult for me to solve the problem of consciousness and quantum mechanics and how these two are related to each other, or the problem of panpsychism, the current geniuses are working on that day and night, or object-oriented ontology, the most recent fad in ontological inquiry. If those things are too difficult for me, and they, I trust that they are, then I'll just go and read Plato, and then I'll just do something that I can do, that makes me feel comfortable. I don't have to be a superstar, and in fact, in our current culture, I don't want to be a superstar. I'm coming out of the shadows, recording these videos to show to everybody that I'm not perfect, that I'm not a superstar, that I want to be a superstar, that my videos are being watched, I don't know, 2 times each one. Each video is being watched 5 times. Obviously, the content is not that interesting, cannot be as popular. But nevertheless, I do what I can, because I choose not based on what kind of light I can be viewed under. I choose the activities in terms of how the activity allows me and enables me to forget myself and pay attention to what is at hand. And I think that should be our aim. I think I need to, and I want to continue meditating on this and this way of being engaged. And I don't want to think about Fabio's article as a kind of a lesson for us all, a warning. What is another phrase for that people often use? A tale, some kind of a tale, I forget the word. It is a side of who we are. It's a side of who I am. It's a side of probably who you are, if you're interested in the article, if it triggered a way of thinking in you. And the article is useful because it revealed something, and we should take that opportunity to discuss it and to respond to it in a way that directs us in the most noble possible way for us, given what we can do. Thank you for your listening, for your attention, and for listening.